at this point, well, actually, I think I'm going to start backwards. Panel, do you have any questions for the folks gathered here? Or maybe I threw you a curveball. We can start normal. We can ask.
Talking at the curb.
What?
Never mind. You said curveball. I said talking at the curb.
Oh.
Sports reference.
He used to be
Baseball.
able to. Never mind. Baseball. It's almost baseball.
Almost, yeah.
I've never been able to hit the curb.
Well, then, I was like, Rick, it's icy out there. Nobody wants to hit the curb.
I have a question.
Yeah, please, Violet.
Turn it on.
Is this thing on? What's the hardest thing for you about accompaniment that you've experienced so far?
So Pastor Violet's question is, what is the hardest thing about accompaniment for you that you've experienced so far? Pastor Julie.
This kind of leads into a question I have, so this is great. The word that kept coming back to me as I was listening to all of you speak was, I think it's Brian Stevenson who talks about being proximate. And you talked about, all of you touched on that. And I think the hardest thing is getting people to be proximate with others. You aren't going to throw a 3-year-old if you have built a relationship with those people. You're not going to do that. But the hardest thing is, how do you become proximate when there's so much fear? So I wonder, how do we do that? How do we overcome, I don't want to say the people in our congregation, I want to even talk about myself. How do I overcome my own fear? How do we all overcome so much fear so that we can become proximate, so that we don't have this hate, so that we can accompany, so we can be in relationship? If we can do that, all of this will go away. If we could be proximate, build relationship.
Pastor Julie, if I can just clarify your use of the word proximate. I don't know how Brian Stevenson uses it, but it sounds like you're using it in a sense of being in the same place.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
And
I-
so,
physically, being in the same place physically.
Because I've heard Brian speak many times, and I do know him and his brother. But what he means is not necessarily being in the same place. It's really more like proximity means we exchange places. I put myself in your place, and I want you to put yourself in mine. Like, we can't help others if we are not in proximity with them.
So emotional.
Not just emotional, physical closeness and emotional closeness. You know, it's like,
Sounds like
put
empathy.
yourself in the other person's place.
And can you just very quickly, Pastor Linda, let folks know who Brian Stevenson is?
So Brian Stevenson is an attorney. He did a lot of civil rights work before he started Equal Justice Initiative, which is headquartered in Montgomery, Alabama, where he continues to do a lot of work. He's done a lot of work in helping those who are wrongfully incarcerated get out. He wrote this book, Just Mercy. He's a very dynamic speaker. Look him up on YouTube. Whatever you watch from him, I'm sure you're going to take a lot away from it and really be blessed.
Well, and he's a criminal defense attorney that often represents folks on death row.
Yes, that too.
I think Julie, one of the first things is we have to identify what is our fear. What's the thing that we're afraid of? And then maybe start from there, because we talk about knocking down walls and it's not making assumptions, but what is the thing that you're afraid of? And then go from that place. And it's not going to be the same for everybody.
That is, in some way, facing your own vulnerabilities and acknowledging your own vulnerabilities and acting in spite of them. I am an incredible introvert, and I think a lot of things around my own personal background have would tend to buttress that, but so quite ironically, I find myself leading worship services out on the outside in the middle of a major northeastern city, so that's sort of ironic. And so I just yeah, I mean that's sort of acting in spite of the fear and both acknowledging it and facing your own demons, I think.
My opinion is if you would just take time to have a conversation with a homeless person, just sit down and just have a cup of tea and conversation. That would overcome some of your fear of being with them. In general, doing to get away from, because there's a lot of fear out here. And the way I get rid of my fear is holding on to my faith. That's my key. All this noise and all this going on around us, I mean, just being down Center City, knowing that ICE is only about a few blocks away from Broad Street, that makes me nervous. But once again, you have to be aware of your surroundings, not be on social media and such, but just, bounce it out so you be protecting yourself and your community.
What you're saying with the faith, right? It's the hanging on to the words of Jesus.
That's right.
Do not fear.
That's right.
Right?
That's
And
right.
so that's what
That's
you're
right.
doing.
Yeah.
And I hear you saying, how do we overcome the fear? But my experience is if I approach someone from a fearful standpoint, that relationship's already gone. So for me to be able to approach someone not with this sense of fear within me because the other person senses that and it distances us, if I come in a more open and welcoming way, I guess full disclosure, I'm a person in recovery for 24 years, and before that, I was a street person, and so there is that connection that still resounds when I am with someone that I can relate to them because I've been there. I think that's become an advantage. Somebody said, "Oh, you went, God put you all through all of that so you could do this." I said, "God didn't put me through that, but God got me through that." So yeah, I think that helps to some extent with the kind of idea of fear.
I think there's something too around meeting people where they are, because I'm just wondering how much in your question was also I can't get someone from my church to go into Philadelphia, and I remember working at a college in the suburbs when I first moved to Philadelphia, community college, rest in peace, and working with freshman students my first year, and how many of them came from the suburbs and said, "This is my first time going into Philadelphia. My parents would never let me go into Philadelphia." And so there's something too about I can't necessarily force you into what feels like the deep end to you without having conversations and building trust and doing a lot of preparation work to get you to a place where you can be open to the experience that I want you to have. And respecting the fact that that fear is real for a lot of people, and they're not going to get over it by us pushing them or shaming them. I'm sure that's not what anyone's doing, but they're not going to get over it through that. They're going to get over it by someone lovingly accompanying them on the journey that they have to accompany others.
I think it's also important to also find people who are doing things, even if they're not, that fear. I think that community that we build, there are people doing amazing things. And the whole society is just that the fear runs, fear sells, and this kind of thing. But I think you have to, if all you're doing is getting this negative stuff, and they want you to do that, and they want you to fear and everything else, and that's all you're surrounded by every day, you're going to get burned out, and this fear is going to overwhelm you, which is one of the things they do. So much of what they do is to install this fear, and we're the only ones that can deal with that. And I always try to find people who are doing, even if it's a small thing, the idea of feeding people, you get so busy and you get so in it, so you also see the good that people are doing. And that's so important. I think every day I look for it, and there's a channel that I look for about news, because I have a thing, I don't have a TV anymore, I sold it, and I'm reading, and you have to stay aware, but you can't let the fear get into it. And unfortunately, all that other stuff is about fear, and this, that. We're the only ones who can say, you have to be, I think, fine, even if it's a small thing, even if it's like a child, sometimes you get away and you just see a child playing with leaves. I was amazed that during fall when these leaves were on the ground, and I had children, I had grandchildren, and children just playing in the leaves in that moment. And that's what, you gotta find that spot where you get renewed in your spirit as we do. And I think it's all, that there are people doing amazing things. There are churches that are sanctuary churches. Find them and maybe work with them. But if you're working on some of these things and you see people, even if it's just feeding somebody, I think you get out of that fear, because the work and the love that the work shows is, I think, the answer to fear. I don't know, and again, I believe in miracles. I know in this kind of real world, but I see miracles in a way every day. Just you got to find that center so you can't be overwhelmed by fear. Somehow we got to find it, because I think I still believe we are going to overcome this. As an elder says, someone born in slavery says, we overcame slavery with a lot less. Get to it, suck it up. There's actually a commercial that says, suck it up, get up there, put on the bold thing, be bold and brave, because again, with all the other stuff that was going on, they told you this would never end. But I think the idea is just finding that a certain spirit. There are people doing amazing things, they're not on the news, but that sanctuary, I know a church in Philadelphia, Arch Street United Methodist Church, a sanctuary church. There are people being bold and brave, and just doing the work and getting people. So I don't know. I think we have to find that we can't be overwhelmed by these forces, because that's what they want you to do, and to despair. And somehow whatever the opposite of fear and despair is, it's there. It's got to be there at the same time. Love, corny as that is, it's love, right?
The only thing I like to say is, just start out with the welcome church.
Everyone
Just start, honestly, just start out on the welcome church on the Parkway. Or, if you have time on a Monday, 21st and Sampson, you will see amazing people that are displaced.
I like this idea of find some friends. If it's daunting to go to Philadelphia or whatnot, find a partner church. We need one inside church, and then come out with us. Certainly, whatever it does, if that helps to bridge a gap, yes. Or find some friends and visit them.
I want to insert myself. I want to name that the opposite of fear is poverty tourism, or giving yourself credibility, right? Having been blessed to work with the Welcome Church for many years, I saw many churches come as a way of poverty tourism, to open up their kids' eyes, or do this or that, or say they met a real life homeless person. And then they also hand out snacks, despite how many times they were instructed, just give it to them. People would be like, well, say thank you, or, insist on some kind of respectability from them. And that's not the goal either, right? Poverty tourism. And we do want you to be working in your own context. So yes, go and visit the Welcome Church and take what you can from that experience and also apply it in your own context.
there is a wonderful program that the Presbyterian Church has. It's free. The leaders are exceptional, and it's called Decolonizing Volunteerism. Along those lines, we did it, I'm part of a network that we started called the Homeless Justice Network. But if anyone wants to look into it, it gives a whole other perspective on volunteers, because volunteers can be a power dynamic, right? A lot of people would get angry at us in the beginning because they would say, and I'm quoting again, but we want to feed. Like, we want to be behind the tables and just give out food. And we'd say, we try to make the move from feeding people to sharing food. Just a different perspective. But the program is excellent, and I am sure they will come to your congregation if invited, and I believe they're free. Do you have the name?
It's they both work for the Presbyterian Disaster Assistance Program, the two people, so see me if you need that contact information. I can get that for you.
I think one of the things that we do when, we'll get churches or something that want to come in and volunteer, or they want to bring their confirmation kids or something. When they get there, I always meet with them and say, we do not have any volunteers here. If you would like to be a part of our community today, we want to welcome you. And please, when it's time for our meal, I want you to sit down at a table with other folks. If there's kids, I say, come in pairs, 2 kids at a time. But sit at the table and talk to our community. So far more valuable for them than standing behind a table, feeding, taking the food and putting it on somebody's plate. So no volunteers, only members of the community. We say you're a member when you say you are. So you show up today, you're a member. If you don't come back, that's okay.
Other questions from the group?
Well, I guess I will make a comment. I think.
Sorry, the reason we're doing the microphone is so that we get a good recording.
I think part of it for me is walking that walk of accompaniment and then becoming overwhelmed by that, knowing and then feeling myself pulled back into the safety of what I have. And then I know the person that I'm accompanying, maybe at that moment, if it's one-on-one, can feel that separation because I'm becoming overwhelmed by it. And all I want is to retreat to what I've worked so hard to build, and I don't want that following me. I have guilt about that, but it's still like that, and I don't know what it is, because most of the time the accompaniment to me is so important and so fulfilling, and then there comes a point that I say I can't, and I don't know what that is, and I don't know what your experience is with that.
It's being honest. I think the most important thing in building relationships is honesty. And that's a very honest feeling. The first year when I started the Welcome Church, I would cry myself to sleep every night because I would be, the minute my face touched the pillow, because I was like, oh my God, I have a blanket, I have a pillow, how real is this? I can't take you home with me, and finally had to work to the point where, first of all, where I realized I was receiving as much as I was giving. It was not one way. But secondly, I have my own limits in what I can and can't do. And so I try to, I love the Serenity Prayer. I think it is like one of the most perfect prayers to change the things I can and, accept what I can't and try to figure out what the difference is. But I love that you said that because it's so honest. And people know, the folks I would know, I'm going to take the train and go to a house. I have a family. And yet, there's this amazing intimacy that happens because we're honest. You know, we're honest. I don't pretend to be, you know, this used to happen to me all the time. I've been married 51 years. My husband's African American. If you can imagine 51 years ago what an interracial marriage was like, it's not like, you know, the commercials of today or the soap operas where you see couples accepted. But people used to make the assumption that because my husband's black, that I knew exactly what it was to be black. I don't. And I never will. And so, and people on the street know that. I don't know your exact experience. And even within that community, it's not a homogeneous group. Everybody has their own experiences. So keep being honest, look at your feelings, and keep doing what you're doing. Even if it's a tiny step at a time, keep doing what you're doing. So.
I feel like we've kind of danced around this, so I just would love if some of the panelists could talk about boundaries for yourself and for your community, because I know we all say all are welcome, we're going to accompany everybody. That's physically impossible, and every community has a boundary on what kind of behavior is welcome, what is not, who is welcome and who is not. I'm wondering if you could just speak to that a little bit.
So I think in our case, yes, we have to have boundaries. First of all, from a personal standpoint, sort of answering what do we do when we're accompanying other people, and sometimes those burdens seem heavy. I always imagine this beautiful crystal ball that I carry with me, and when things get too heavy, I put them in that crystal ball and I give that to God, and it relieves me of carrying that. From a boundary standpoint, for the most part, we have what I call timeouts. When someone becomes inappropriate in the community, I approach them, I tell them what's going on. What I always say to them is, you are welcome to do that behavior, you're just not welcome to do it here. Because if I tell them you can't do that, now I've got pushback. So to say you can do that, you just can't do it here. And then they get a timeout, and then what the rule is, if it's 4 weeks or whatever, when they are ready to come back, if they want to, they must come back early and meet with me. And I assess whether they're appropriate for the community. A lot of times it's sexual acting out, inappropriate conversations and things like that need to be addressed. I've had people expose themselves, I've had people get into fights, I've had people pull knives. Don't mean to scare you, but they're all things that will happen in a community. But I've never had anybody be injured. It's never been a problem because someone else at that table was able to get up and de-escalate the situation. So hopefully that helps to understand boundaries, and my personal boundaries. I have to have really strong boundaries in order to do the work I do. And the work that I think each and every one of us do. Boundaries are critical.
Well, any one of you can speak to the boundaries in the Welcome Church. First of all, there's no physical or verbal violence. And this is challenging, but we won't tolerate racist or homophobic or any comments that can injure someone or the community. And there was a time when Kayla was substituting. We were out, Shawna and I were out, and she did a Bible study. And then Kayla, there was someone in there who were, from her religion. I don't know what the exact comments were, but what we did when we came back was we addressed it with the whole community. So that's one kind of boundary that we address. Another kind is, there's a lot of mental illness. There was someone who threatened physical violence. He was not allowed, he does not come in the building, because don't forget, when we're in a building, we're in somebody else's space. However, he's not shunned. So he still will be given food, he still will be, when we're outside, become part of it. So there's different ways, but no, you cannot be in this space. You have threatened to physically hurt someone. The third thing is the most difficult. And I'll give you an example. We have one woman who was filled with head lice, body lice, would not accept treatment. So this is something that can harm the whole community, highly contagious. We wrestled with what to do. We talked to her individually. We bought her what she needed. We found a place that she could use it, because just think about this. It's not just buying the shampoo. Where do you go if you can't, that was a really big boundary when we had asked her to do that. But those are the ones that break my heart, because you're thinking of the safety of the whole community. This poor woman, even though she wouldn't acknowledge it, and she said, no, this is just, my head's just dry, but you could visibly see lice all over. So you have to have boundaries, otherwise a whole community will fall apart and suffer. And it is one of the most difficult things to have to do. We do it as a community, and when it's something more confidential, like the woman with lice, we have a team of like 4 or 5 of us and our Welcome Church leaders. We bring challenges to that team, and we try to figure out the most compassionate way to address the situation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our staff are social workers, and so there's a lot of boundaries that are baked into that based on their professional training. But I think it's really helpful to always come back to, and I'm hearing others say this, like always come back to the why. Like, why is it that we have certain rules in place? That comes up a lot for me in our shelter work, because there is something within human nature where when you are having a position of authority over another person, there is just room for abuse within that. And so it's a constant work in shelter work around how you create a welcoming space where you're not controlling people, but rather trying to uphold certain rules that are for the safety of the full community. And if you're not aware of the fact that those dynamics are within you, that any one of us is going to slip into, this is the rule and I have to enforce the rule, and like if you're not aware of that constantly, it's too easy to slip into places where rule following becomes, I'm following the rule because it's the rule and I'm enforcing the rule, rather than I'm looking out for the well-being of the full community. And that is something I feel like is frequently challenging. And the other thing I would just point out with boundaries is that we talk about all the time is there is no way to get around the power imbalance. There is a power imbalance always in our work, and we do a lot to try to fight against that power imbalance, but it's there, and pretending it's not there doesn't help anyone. And so as we think about where our boundaries come from, some of them are in place so that we are not playing into that power imbalance.
Lauren, I just want to check with you. Do you feel like that spoke to your question, or was it also about like within, because you mentioned behaviors within the community, like what's acceptable in church? Is that part of your question too?
Yeah. I did feel like some of that was addressed too, that, some boundaries we think of as examples that you gave, things that would endanger the wider community or challenge the nature of community. I think some of what I'm wondering about boundaries is also about there are limits to what each community is capable of accomplishing. And so, we're a small congregation in Upper Bucks County. What we accomplish will be different from a different community. And so some of that is also plays into what I think of as like almost a more positive understanding of boundaries, but I wanted to hear about the challenging pieces of boundaries. I think that's one of the hardest parts, to place boundaries on what it is, that there are going to be times when we say this might not be the community for you. And that's, I think, one of, as Pastor Little was saying, one of the most heartbreaking things.
So this stemmed from your question as well, but how do you navigate the people in your community who only focus on the challenges of accompaniment, where those boundaries have to be deployed? How do you navigate with the people around you who only focus on the challenges of accompaniment?
Can I offer another? Or whether they say it as that, or whether they're just well, here are all the reasons we should not do that thing, because it could be bad. There could be this reaction. Is that kind of what you're saying, Ro? Okay. Great question. And to give you a flavor of our context, we are not in the suburbs. We are in rural PA. So sometimes when I come to Philadelphia, I'm asked if I have to stay in a hotel. I don't have to stay in a hotel, but that is emotionally how far away my context is.
We've been running into that, and fortunately, as a organization, we have a mission statement, we have value statements, and so one of the questions we ask over and over is, does this fit within the purview of who we are and what we do? Like these groceries that all of a sudden we started picking up, our folks started picking up groceries everywhere and bringing them in, and the next thing it was well, we need another refrigerator because we need, some place to put the groceries before we can put them out. And so when we got together in our board meeting, we talked about that and said, there are places where folks can get groceries. That is not part of our mission, because it's important that we're not duplicating the same services that someone else is doing that's a block away from us. And so I've had to curtail some of that grocery stuff because it didn't fit within what it was that we defined as who we are. And I think that helps if you begin to define what is your mission, then anything that comes up, you can look at your mission and say, does it fit within that, or is this going in a whole new direction? And then you can ask yourself, well, is that something we want to do? And then you can expand your mission.
I really like your question because I think that's realistic in many places. Two things I want to say. One is our biggest support comes from small congregations. And we love the heart that's in the small congregations. And that's everything from whether it's making snack bags to winter supplies, or actually coming down and doing a coffee hour. So there is no too small. It's just everything counts and is sacred to us. The other thing is, go back to your roots. Who are we really? I mean, we're church, right? We're not really a social ministry organization, and that's one of the reasons we have weekly Bible study, and we have a number of people from within our community who lead it, take turns leading it, because it will be through different eyes. But unless we stick to the core of who we are, we work with many wonderful social ministry organizations in Philadelphia. And we work with the city, and we work with Harrisburg, federal government, everything. But what makes us different, I was a social worker before I went to seminary. I am also a therapist with a private practice. The reason I am a pastor and love being a pastor is I can unashamedly say there is a God who is gracious and merciful, and you are so loved, and that's amazing. And we start from there. So that when all the reasons of why we can't, and we get them all the time, why we can't do something, we go back to our core and say, you know, the way Eric was pointing out, well, you know, we don't wear WWJD bracelets or anything, but we kind of talk about it and say, what is it? Who is this Jesus, and who do we say? Who do we say he is, and who do we say we are? So don't ever lose that core. And we're not going to find housing for everybody, and we're not going to reconnect everybody with their families, and we're not going to save everybody's life. But the one thing we can do is we can say, you are a beloved child of God, no questions asked. And in terms of boundaries, I spend half of my week sitting with people who are on crystal meth while they're on crystal meth, talking about a minute, or drunk, or high on something else. So, you know, but some of you might have a space that you can't do that. And that's okay. Whatever your context is okay. The contexts are all different, so be affirmed in that. But remember who we are.
That's enough of
I wanted to go back to your question, sir in the hat. Were you asking about, because I'm not sure if I was understanding correctly, were you asking about like people that don't seem to be getting a lot of joy out of accompaniment? They're just focused on like the challenges and the messiness of it?
They want it to happen, but like they're scared of the consequences of what, like, They want it to happen, but they're scared of the consequences of when it like when it does.
Do you want to give like an example? Like, do you have one in your mind?
Yeah. Like what you say, like inviting people in for like a dinner. Like for, like the conflicts that will come with that. Like what happens if like they break something. Like, or just like craziness like occurs.
Never happens.
Put that worry aside.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, one of the things I always say to people when I speak to groups is that, I'm imagining you all have a similar experience. Like, I always say to people, like, the overwhelming feeling in our work is joy. And I think people, because of the populations we work with, assume weeping and gnashing of teeth. Like, they just assume other things are going on, but overwhelmingly what we find is joy. And so sometimes it's just a matter of getting someone there and making the leap to experience that. Another part that goes into that, though, is that like real accompaniment can like really mess you up. Like if you think your life is on a certain track. When I went down to the border, that same man, Ruben, he's very much a touchstone for me. When I gave a 9-month commitment, and he said to me during my orientation, is this going to be an experience that you pull out at cocktail parties and is a good story to tell? Or are you going to allow this experience to change who you are and to change your life? That messed me up. I had a whole plan for my life. I wound up staying there for over 3 years and went into working in social services because I heard what he said and it spoke to me. It was like, I think I am looking for something to change who I am, and the experiences that I could point to before that were good stories that I would tell. And that's a real thing. Like opening yourself up to people will change who you are, and change is scary. And I think it's important for us who are working with the people in our congregations and our organizations who are going through that scary process need our support as they're going through it, because it can well, I think the Jesuits have the term ruined for life. Like, it can really, it can mess you up. In the best possible ways, but still mess you up.
Yeah, Eric.
What would you say to people who are not interested in being changed?
Yeah.
For anything, for any reason?
Just to piggyback on that is the fact that as we're sitting here, our congregation has an older, we've always done it this way, vocal intimidating factor, right? And we, again, are focusing on that small intimidating voice, you know? I'm starting to hear as I'm talking to you that we need to turn away from the small intimidating voice. We are, we continuously come back to it because it's loud and it's vocal and it says no continuously. And then we're like, well, how can we turn the no into a yes? And I'm starting to think that the no has to stay, can stay a no and may become a yes, maybe not. You know, because we spend a lot of time, and that's exactly what the no wants, is us to just stop.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm hearing it here that, wait a minute, maybe we don't have to bring the no along. They can just sit there and say no. I don't know.
You know what? Expand your pool. If all you're hearing are the voices within your congregation, go outside of your congregation. Widen the pool. You know, you put a little bit of salt in, what do they say, like a little cup and you taste it or whatever, but if you put it into a wider pool, it's kind of, you know, not as much. And look, I'm not an expert, none of us here are experts. We have the longing to do accompaniment, and we keep it's an ing kind of thing, like recovering. We keep working at it. But ask for I won't speak for the other people on the panel, but call for outside support when you're going through something. We've started a number of street churches, or helped people start a number of street churches across the country, and sometimes the only encouragement they needed were several phone calls back and forth, or my visiting them, including Church on the Street, which is in South Dakota. That started from having conversations with us. Or Welcome Church in El Cajon, where the Chaldean community is being served. Widen your pool. There's any of us, if for nothing else, who can give you encouragement, and every time you say no, we can say, well, we think maybe you can, you know. So use the church.
Can I add one thing to that? Oh, wait, no, if you're going to speak, I also, and I'm very curious what you all think of this. There's something about, I keep thinking about, like, there's something about, like, one size doesn't fit all in terms of how to connect people. Like, I am a deeply introverted person, and it is incredibly intimidating to me to put me in a room and say, mingle, talk to people. Like, that's incredibly anxiety producing. And I have seen people get involved in this work because they came and they were doing maintenance projects or painting a room or doing our books, like working as accountants and volunteer. And that was like an entry point to them, and they began to connect with others, and the work really began to be meaningful and life-changing for them. But they needed an entry point that was maybe different than what other people need. Like, I myself was a terrible social worker, caseworker when I was trying to do that, and found I was really good at administration. And for a long time, I was really I felt bad about myself because I wasn't able to do it in this way that I thought was most valuable or most meaningful. And it's been a process of sort of accepting there's different ways of finding connection, and the purpose is to help everyone find their own path.
If there's one more quick question, otherwise I want to recognize we might be bumping up into lunchtime. Anything you feel like would be for the benefit of the group? All right, I know you're all sticking around for lunch, but I want to take this opportunity to formally thank you. This was incredible. Thank you so much. And I will bless, oh wait, Pastor Julie was gonna bless the food. She was already voluntold.
volunteered.
I was voluntold.
Yeah,
FYI. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give thanks that we have the opportunity to serve you and your people. We pray that your Holy Spirit would work in us, give us the courage to accompany those for whom the world has given no voice. We pray that you be with us around table, around conversation, that this food would nourish us for our work and service in the world. In the name of Jesus, amen.